Hello, everyone. Welcome to Titan Alumni Talks, a weekly podcast where we talk to alumni about their experiences at Cal State Fullerton. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming to campus today. I understand that you were here earlier on campus, so can you tell us why that was?
Yeah, so Phi Alpha Theta is the History Honor Society on campus, and they put together a panel of what can I do with my history degree, which is a great question for history majors. I feel like of all the majors, I think historians struggle the most with thinking outside the box about what's possible with a history degree. Most of us tend to get kind of myopia into academia and education, and so it was a really great discussion. The students had a lot of great questions, and it was good to brainstorm with them.
And you've been part of that society since?
I joined when I was a student, so it might be a lifetime thing. I think I've always been a member.
So they just invite you back to campus for different things to talk about? Okay, that's pretty interesting. So since it was a history thing, you did graduate in 2005 with a history degrees and a focus in religious studies.
Yes.
So what sparked that interest? Tell me about that.
History for me, it honestly isn't more complicated than it was the subject I loved most when I was in high school. So I knew I would go to college. When it came time to pick a major, I'm like, what can I handle studying for 4 years? That was the extent of the forward thinking that went into that decision. It was a really good decision. I'm glad I did it. So yeah, that was the extent.
And then you got your master's from Wharton College in 2007.
Wheaton College.
Oh, Wheaton College. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
And in religious studies. So where did that come in from then?
Yeah. So while I was at Cal State Fullerton, my mentor in the history department was Ronald Riefeld. We all called him Doc. It was just understood in the history department at the time. I was here from 2001 to 2005. It's been a while since I've been here on campus. But Doc was the quintessential history grandpa type. He had the white beard, the glasses. The very first class I ever took with him, I was a freshman. He walked into class, and I had heard about this man. He had a reputation that I heard about when I was in high school as just an amazing historian. His specialty was the Lincoln era, Civil War era. He walked into class, pulled out a yellow pad of paper that had all of his notes on it, and I'm sitting there as a student thinking, this could be very dull and boring, and he's just going to read his notes. And he started reading his notes, but they're his brain and his heart. And after about 10 minutes, you just got enveloped into the storyteller that he was.
So it wasn't monotone like you would expect it to be?
No. It was like you would imagine sitting at your grandfather's knee and hearing stories about history. And it all came alive. He was an amazing teacher. Interestingly, he is considered an expert in Lincoln and the Civil War in that academic area in academia. But he's never published a book that I know of. His emphasis was always he wanted to be a teacher. He was always passing on that knowledge and passing on those stories. And I can talk to any alum I went to school with, and we all still have stories about Doc. So I don't remember what the original question was, but how did history go? So he really developed that love of story in me. I did some of my best research projects under him, et cetera. And then he was the one who inspired me to go on and study church history at Wheaton College. I come from that faith community, from the Christian faith, and I find most people in whatever faith community they're a part of know the piece that they grew up with. That's their entire context for that particular faith. And when you step out and study the broader history of it, God gets bigger, the tradition gets bigger, and I think there's a lot more of that understanding across some of those traditions, which I love studying. It didn't necessarily lead right into career path, but it made me a better human being in a lot of ways. So, yeah. Once you start talking to me about career, history is not going to play as big a role, but it plays a huge role in my formation as a learner and as a colleague.
Yeah. So you mentioned that he didn't write any books and he was a history professor. Is it a norm for history professors to write books?
I feel like a lot do. I think and this is perception, but I think Cal State Fullerton is an institution when I was a student here, and I think this is still to some extent true, but there's an emphasis on professors who teach, not just professors who are scholars who do research, and students get to kind of come along for the ride with them, which I think is a lot of the bigger research universities. And I'm glad I went to this type of university. I'm glad I had that much more human relational context with my professors. He could have written a dozen books on the subject, but he was instead the subject matter expert who was passing that along.
Mm-hmm. And then you said you heard about him when you were in high school. So is that a reason why you came to Cal State Fullerton?
It's one of them, and I couldn't tell you what I heard other than, whoa, when you get to Cal State Fullerton, make sure and get Doc. Who's Doc? And you get here and yeah, reputation precedes.
I see. So that was one of them. What are the other reasons why you specifically chose Cal State Fullerton?
So I'm a local kid. I grew up in Long Beach. I did not choose to go to the beach.
You didn't? You're
never
not a beach
regret
person?
that decision. No.
Wait, you don't
no,
regret
I mean,
that?
Cal State Long Beach.
Okay. I was worried
Beat
for a
the
second.
beach. I'm a loyal Titan for life. Cal State Long Beach was just a little too close to home. This was a good stay in Southern California, but reputation was there, so I had a chance to apply for and receive the President's Scholarship, the President's Scholar Program. And that, it's a full ride. It's a super well-supported program that I'm also a very proud alum of, and that was what ultimately made the decision for me. I did not come from a family that looked at college like, oh yeah, no problem. It was, a scholarship was definitely going to be important, and I'm really grateful for that. When I left Cal State Fullerton, it was debt-free. Master's, not so much, but I was really grateful for that start because it was solid. It was a great education, and I wasn't hurting by the time I got out of college.
Especially with a history degree.
Yeah, because we make so much money as historians. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the President's Scholar. Can you tell me more about that? How did that happen to you? What events turned into that?
So we have, I think it's 6 or 7 scholar programs at Cal State Fullerton currently. I think when I was a student, there were maybe 2 or 3.
Okay.
Excuse me. These are programs that various donors have endowed, continue to fund, et cetera, but it really allows different students with different abilities coming in to be supported in different ways. So the President's Scholars is the oldest. We are the first program in the Cal State system. We were the model that a lot of other Cal States built their President's Scholar program on. I'm not going to remember the year. It was sometime in the late 70s that it was founded, if I remember correctly. But it's a program that high school seniors can apply for when they're coming into college. It combines academic record, community service, leadership, and just kind of I'm going to sound like I'm bragging when I say this, but a higher level of engagement, thinking about the world, a desire to really lean in. So the scholars as a group at any given season are highly engaged individuals that are often called on to represent the university as students. I was part of the largest class. My class was, I think, 36 students came in. Normally it's more like anywhere from 15 to 25 is a normal class, I think. So at any given time, there's 75 to 100 President's Scholars on campus, and just they're great. I'm very involved in the Alumni Club, and just some of the most stellar individuals I've ever met.
I see. So does the President's Scholar Club take into account certain things like, say, the major you're trying to get into, or other work that you're doing on campus, or how does that work?
It does. It's across all majors. There tend to be trends. The Alumni Club is always curious to see what are our scholars that are graduating this year heading toward. We're definitely starting to see more of the STEM fields, and nursing has been a big one. But yeah, it's across majors. There's expectations when you're a student as far as volunteering together, so that comes into play. But I don't know.
And I know you did very well in college. You had a fantastic GPA at that time.
Thanks.
Right?
If I had it to do over again, could I do it again? I don't know.
But so in doing that, was that required of you, or were there certain expectations that came with it?
Yeah, we did have to maintain a certain GPA. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was high. So Dean's List was just a given. You had to make the Dean's List.
That was a bare minimum.
No pressure.
Yeah.
So yes, occasionally there will be a scholar that college does not go well for, and they lose their scholarship. But most of us, we have a lot of support to make sure we meet those expectations, and that community of scholarship. When you're with scholars, you rub off on each other. There's that. Sometimes it can be pressure in a bad way, but the other aspect of that is just you're motivated by the inspiration of the other people you're studying with. We now have a scholar center on campus, and literally studying together in the same space. I have a deep value of camaraderie, and that element of we're all learning together and pushing each other. And when you have to motivate yourself, you have to really care versus having that, I don't know how to describe it.
External motivation?
Extra motivation, the element you get when you take a group of people and it's that feeding off of each other thing. It just creates a different type of energy and engagement. And that was what I experienced with the President's Scholars every year I was here.
I see. And then it's like a tight-knit group. When you mentioned it's like 30-something students, and that was a high class.
Yeah.
Whereas normally it's quite a bit lower.
Yeah. So we have 450 plus alumni on record from this program, and at least 100 to 150 are currently engaged in the Alumni Club. And these are people who I may not have gone to school with them. I may have met them at various events, etc. But every single time I am sitting across from a scholar, it is a dynamic conversation, which is not a given with every human you meet and interact with on a daily basis. Small talk being what it is. I'm an introvert, so I like deep talk, and small talk drives me crazy. And when I'm sitting across from a President's Scholar, whatever their experience is, they are in it. There is a depth to it and a level of engagement that is always interesting.
I see.
You want to talk with them more.
Mm-hmm. And then at that time, the president is very close to the students who are in it. So at that time, it was Dr. Milton Gordon.
Yes, Uncle Milty.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what was your experience with that, being that close to the president and having that relationship with him?
Dr. Gordon was an incredible man. I have and had so much respect for his story and his legacy. I was part of the event honoring him this fall when we opened Gordon Hall. It used to be University Hall and it's now Gordon Hall. Dr. Gordon was just his life. If you know anything about his biography, incredible leader and trailblazer. A very, when you were with him, there was a quietness to him that had impact. A little bit more reserved, so warm, and you knew he had all of that life behind him, and what he wanted for students was the best that they could possibly accomplish. He would stop in at our student meetings and want to know what we were working on. Any given university, the ways that presidents find to interact with the students is unique to them, and we loved that time with Dr. Gordon. What we've experienced from Fram in his brief tenure as president so far has been very similar. He brings so much energy and enthusiasm anytime I see him around the President's Scholars, any students, but the President's Scholars and the alumni, he and Julie have both been amazing as well. Mm-hmm.
Because I had dinner with them, I believe last year when they hosted a D12 dinner.
Yes.
And it is fantastic. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Was it around when you were here or no?
Which?
D12 dinners.
It wasn't in place when I was a student that I know of, but I've hosted one as an alum.
Oh, you have? Okay. Yeah. How was that? How was yours?
It was fun. It was, it's so random in some ways because you get a group of students who don't know each other who, bless them, they trucked all the way down to Costa Mesa where I live, and I think it was a rainy night to boot, and they did it. And that first couple minutes, you're just like,
it's awkward.
Figuring out how to connect. It is awkward, absolutely. And then by the end, we had such rich conversation about life journeys and how they're never straight lines, ever. And that flexibility to really figure out, what you're curious about at any given point in life, and what you want to go after, and what it takes to do it, and weighing those costs. It's a great conversation, and I have one student who reached out to me on LinkedIn afterwards, and I've maintained a little bit of contact with and cheering her on in her journey. And so it was great. Awkward and great. Because everybody should do D12.
Because we just had it last weekend. Yeah. And then I went to it, and it comes to that point where at the beginning you're kind of like, oh, why am I here? Why is everything happening? Oh, when's it gonna be over? But then it becomes it's an hour it's an hour after you guys are supposed to leave, and then it gets like an hour and a half, and you're like, do I have to leave yet? Like, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. So
it's nice having those relationships with the alum and with other students that you have no clue who they are, who their name is, and like what their major is. Because when I went there, I was the only person in computer science, and it's interesting to see people from like all different majors, and then because normally I communicate with people in computer science, or at least in that field where maybe they're math majors or physics majors, but having conversations with all different types of people, it's just fantastic.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in the life that happens around tables with food. I think we all live in such a digital landscape that it is very easy for work and relationships to all happen via text, via social media platforms, and we don't really realize it until we're sitting down at a table how much we need to have those real, true moments of human connection. Fun story about me and my life. I built a dining room table about 7 years ago. I never took wood shop in school. I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, you built it from scratch?
I built it from scratch.
Oh.
Surprisingly, it's still standing 7 years later. It was, there were tears that went into that project. Like, how do I make this work?
Tears.
But I was determined. I really wanted a square table, something that really felt like a, not Knights of the Round Table, but you really had that, like everybody's gathered around. There's no head of it. But it seats 8. And over the last 7 years, over 200 people have eaten around it at some point. I have a guest list thing on my wall. And I don't say that to talk about a big number, because every single one of those dinners has been, 8 or under. And those people are ones that have impacted my life with something about their story. And hopefully I've done the same. And when it happens over food, there's a human memory that happens in those moments. We're all familiar with the Maya Angelou quote, people will not necessarily remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Some version of that. I'm butchering the quote, but you get the idea. And there is that element of when you have those gatherings, who you become as a person or the things you become curious about. Those, we need those, and we don't have enough of it in our world, especially how digital we've gotten. Very.
Yeah, I'm curious. What made you build your own table? There's so many tables to buy from IKEA. I'm curious. What is that? The only thing you built, or have you built something else since then? I built
a few other things, but that's the only piece of furniture. I don't know. I think at the time the tables at IKEA were not what I wanted. The size of I don't know. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I want.
Custom made is the best. Have it however you like. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, talking more about President Gordon and his relationship with you guys, how close were you? Were you guys talking constantly and just keeping communication?
I think different scholars had different relationships with him. I worked as a student assistant in his office for my first year, so I got to know him a little bit better. But we were at enough events with him that we had a level of familiarity with him where we could, I think, if you talk to most scholars, I think they'd probably say they were totally comfortable going up to him, asking questions, engaging with him. They may not have described it as a deeply personal relationship, but he knew a lot of our names. It was that, I describe it as collegial, that exchange of ideas and relationship. It was a very open door with him. Any university president, of a university this size is managing so much on a daily basis, but we saw him consistently enough.
So what do you think the goal is of a president with the students on campus? Because obviously they have the overhead things meant to take care of, but with the students in particular, what do you think their goals should be as in their time as president?
See, I want to make that a topic of dinner conversation. Come the next D12, we'll have that conversation. I've spent some time in my career around higher education and administration, and I have a level of familiarity with what it takes to run a university, and it's a lot. That it is the type of thing I can't imagine having a good night's sleep. It's big, and any president has to prioritize where his or her care is going to go. And that's the case of a president of any institution, really, because you can't care about everything. I think presidents have to figure out where their engagement points with students are going to be. We were lucky with Dr. Gordon and with Fram now that there has been that engagement. I think just making sure that there are points of connection with different student groups, so you get that cross section of what students are experiencing on campus, because that's your customer, that's your product. And those are a lot of human beings who are trusting their education to ultimately you and the board. And keeping those checkpoints and to be able to gauge is really important, more from that analytical standpoint. But I think presidents who have those relational points with students are also going to be more content presidents. I think if you're trying to run a university without that love and care, and you're gonna lose the reason you exist. And so I love seeing the pictures of Fram and Julie at basketball games and baseball games and all of the places that they make sure they're part of student life. I love that they've made that commitment. I think that he is a happier president, I imagine, because of that.
Yeah, and it's even if when they're not alumni, they still partake in things where alumni would be a part of and students, and you almost forget that they didn't go to this university because of how well they are. Like
the honorary Titans.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Because they put so much time and effort and just love into the university and the students that go here to the point where you just expect them. You're like, oh, they didn't go here. It just you just think that it would be something that they did.
Well, I've worked at a university that I was not an alum of, and from that perspective, I love university culture. I love as a space in our world that is dedicated to learning and growing and transforming. And it's just a different ecosystem. I think those spaces become contagious for everybody who works there and interacts. I've interacted with plenty of people here in the Alumni House who are not alums, but they care about us and our experience and support our loyalty as Titans in beautiful ways.
Mm-hmm. So going back to that, you taught at Vanguard University for 8 years as an interim professor. So what made you want to teach in the first place, and then why Vanguard to begin with? Sorry about that. Sometimes we get... All right, yes, we can continue with that.
So just briefly, my career journey. So history major here, got my master's in history, figured that I would go on into academia. I had every intention of following my master's with a PhD program and being faculty somewhere. That did not work out very well. That was the biggest experience of failure I've had in my life, and classically, failure is also a great teacher. I didn't get into any of the PhD programs I applied to, and so I came home from the Chicago area, got a job as an administrative assistant at Vanguard. It was just sending out resumes everywhere, and that was the one that hired me. So that was my first job, and I was working for the CFO at the time, which, history majors who work for CFOs, sure, no problem. But I learned a ton working under him. Just little tip, if you want to get into an industry, being an administrative assistant to a C-suite executive is a brilliant place to get in the door, because you end up, by extension, doing a lot of their job with them, and you learn a ton. And so funny story, I was making copies one day, and the assistant provost at the time, I believe, came in and was chatting about a faculty member who had just taken a job at another university and having to fill his classes, and turned to me and was like, "You have a master's in history, right? You want to teach a class?" Like, yes. What the heck just happened? Because in my world, there are a lot of unemployed PhDs, let alone unemployed people with their masters. And yes, I would love to be an adjunct professor. Sure, great, sign me up. So a week later, I was teaching my first research writing class and had no idea what I was doing. Great learning curve. But went on to teach about one a semester for 8 years, taught research writing and church history there, and absolutely loved it. Loved every minute in the classroom. Maybe not every minute, but most minutes in the classroom because of that engagement. But I discovered along the way that if I had pursued that full time, I would have been miserable.
I see.
Which there's a lot of discoveries you can guess at, but you can't really make in college. You have to get into the work world and figure out what works for you, what doesn't. For me, I'm very operations minded, so give me systems to administer and operate, and also a learning environment. That's an ideal combination for me, and so I kind of try and look for that combination wherever I go. But if I had been teaching full time, I would have gone a little crazy. Bless the people who do it.
So there's a talk about people have certain skills, but there's also luck involved with a lot of things that happen. So that seems like it's something that happened in this case, where you were properly skilled for the task at hand, but it was also just an opportunity that came out of nowhere for it.
Yeah. It's going to sound very cliche to say you have to know someone. It's very true. When I was sitting with the Phi Alpha Theta students earlier, we were having a conversation about how do you get indoors? I'm like, honestly, you get the entry-level job and you go from there. Things develop organically. You look for those opportunities. You look for mentors who can open doors for you. and you hope you're in the copier room at the right moment. Yes, there are definitely those moments that are fortuitous that change a direction, but a lot of it is showing up and looking for the opportunities, being observant, being proactive with them, and knowing that not every single one is going to put you in the place you want to be in. Sometimes there's detours, and I'm going to sound like a very cliche broken record.
No, but it's a good
it's true
message through it.
Yeah.
So I believe Vanguard is a very small university, right?
I think it's, I should remember this. It's been a couple of years, maybe 3,000 students.
Yeah, it's around 2,000 to 5,000,
yeah,
I believe.
Yeah.
Which is significantly smaller than Cal State Fullerton.
Oh yeah.
How big was Cal State Fullerton when you went here? Do you know when? You know how much?
I want to say like 33,000.
Oh, okay. So I mean,
what is it now?
It's 40,000 right now.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah. So I'm like Vanguard was like super small compared to it.
Yeah.
So being a teacher there, well, do you know what year you taught or like what class level?
I research writing was a like 200 level course.
Oh, okay.
And church history I think was 400 level. So
it
varied.
So like a little bit like freshman, sophomore, and then seniors with that too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
I had the cross section.
But it also seems that you weren't passive either, especially when you didn't get your PhD. You were still working on finding a solution to your unemployment issue at that time, where it's like, I need to work somewhere. Yes,
there was that moment of, I'm an adult, I need a job. Yeah. I think I struggled in my 20s. The messaging I grew up with generationally was you can do anything you set your mind to. And that has an aspirational value to it, but it's not really reality in our world. You try hard, but you have to also learn to practice contentment with whatever you're doing at the time. And I think most of my 20s in my work world, I was just kind of antsy and discontent, and that affected my ability to, I did my job well, but I think if I had that to do over again, I think of any years in my life that I would want to do over again as far as the way I approached it, it would be those early years after grad school of getting into the work world. And the mentor I had came into my life probably when I was about 28 or so, and she did a lot of perspective shifting with me, and I'm a different person and a different employee and leader because of her influence, and that came at a really key moment. So that is the one piece of advice I will give anybody, is pay attention to who can mentor you in your life. I am in a place in my life where I am actively looking for another person who will help me become the next best version of my world. It's super important.
You know what I want to touch on? A lot of people, like you just mentioned, we should find a mentor, and a lot of people say that we should look for someone who can mentor us. But how do we go about, how did you go about finding a mentor, and who is right, and how do you go about asking them to mentor you in your life?
I'm going to answer that question in reverse by starting with an encouragement of people to look for the people you can mentor.
I see.
Wherever you happen to be in your life, someone else needs you to help them get there.
But how do we find that? Because sometimes, I'm a college student. Does that mean I can mentor a high school student? Or
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So just like any level you completed so far.
Yeah. Whatever you would consider yourself far enough in that you can lend wisdom to somebody else who's not there yet.
I see.
And that could look like something small, something big. The mentor I had, she was the vice president of University Advancement at Vanguard when I started working for her. I was her administrative assistant for 2 years, and she gave me my first management position. I vividly remember, I had worked with her close enough that we had a very personal relationship. She invited me over to her house one night, poured us both a glass of bourbon because she's Southern. I'm like, oh, this is okay, yes, great, and proceeded to give me my first management position. It was just one of those moments. I feel like it happens more for men than women. It was such a great moment of her saying, I've trained you. I know you can do this job. You will learn on the job. You can't do it today as is, but it was brilliant. And she poured into me over the course of 2 years to get me to that position. And I wouldn't be where I am today without her. So I look for those same moments now because I'm a director now, and I have similar people who are junior colleagues in my department who I can similarly help pay attention to things and help think about things differently that otherwise they may not engage with it that way.
Yeah.
So I think it starts with people who are willing to be mentors. But I notice in my life, I tend to be very self-sufficient, self-motivated, and I often, and what my pride gets in the way a lot in seeking out those mentors. So I need to actively be doing that. But yeah, to your question, lots of different ways, and that's a hard question to answer.
It's just like a right time, right person, right
kind
place.
of. Sometimes it's very intentional, and the world of LinkedIn being what it is, there's sometimes that seeking out someone in a job that you want to figure out how to get to and trying to find a connection with them. If there's someone who can make the world of making a warm introduction, if you can get someone to introduce you to that person, amazing. Mm-hmm. If there's something you can do to put yourself in the same place as some of those people, so whether that's a volunteer activity that gets you into a room with people serving on a board that you're interested in, or in a position you're interested in, thinking spatially is probably the first thing that comes to mind, and putting yourself in those rooms. Asking around. So right now, I have a mentor coach right now that's doing some professional development with me in leadership. And that was reaching out to someone I know and respect in a field saying, have you ever had a coach like this? Is there someone you'd recommend? And she did. And there's the connection. That's more of a formal coaching relationship than a one-time or recurring mentorship. But I'm bringing it back around to our Titan world. I know Titan Pro Network has been launched and is really hopefully going to lend itself to that. The President's Scholar Alumni Club is starting to use it to connect with our current students, because that's the way we most want to help our current President Scholars, is helping them, vision forward and plot out some of the things that, some of the ways they get there, and realize that it's not going to be a smooth, clean line. Yeah,
because like you mentioned with LinkedIn before, Titan Pro Network is basically our LinkedIn site. Mm-hmm. And I checked it recently, and we have I think over 1,000 alumni who are signed up on it, which is a pretty good number for the time we just started it, which was last year. So getting that many alumni being able to help students, and they have specific fields where they can assist in, and majors too. So you're signed up on it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then if someone wanted to...
You can find me on Titan Pro Network, everybody. Yes. If something I've said sounds wise. I don't know about that.
So do you want to be a mentor? Is it something that you feel you're ready for, or is it a certain time when you believe, okay, I have the resources to give and the wisdom to also give?
Mm-hmm. It kind of depends on whatever the circumstance is. If there is someone very clearly in my life that I can help, I will absolutely, say yes, depending on the time commitment of that. Yeah. We all live with finite time in our lives, so there's that figuring out what the value is for them and for me. But yeah, absolutely. I think honestly, everyone should be open and willing to do that with whatever wisdom they've gleaned. It's how we help each other as human beings.
Yeah. And is it like a formal thing that you have to ask, like, hey, can you be my mentor? Or is it something that you just come to them for advice at times?
Quite honest, I think, most people, if you approach them with, you're doing this, you're finding success in this, I'd love to pick your brain, can we get a cup of coffee together? Okay. I don't think I'm ever going to really say no to something like that. And if there's that connection, because sometimes those are just awkward. You get a little bit and you go on your way. I remember I was studying at University of Notre Dame one summer when I was here, and connected with a professor in my field a Notre Dame professor. Asked him, would you have dinner with me or coffee with me and tell me all the things I need to know about this field? And bless him, he did. There's no reason he should have needed to. It was summer, he was bored, I'm sure. But he took me to the faculty lounge one night, and I have an impression of the amount of information he just downloaded. It was intense, and I kept pinching myself like, this is a guy whose books I've read in class. And I'm sitting across from him eating dinner. But he said yes. All I had to do was ask, and yeah, sure. And I think that's the type of thing where that was a one-time thing, one-time download. It was great. I was really appreciative. That wasn't something where I was going to ask him to mentor me from 2,000 miles away on a consistent basis. So maybe start with that one-time reach out, and if you have a connection and there's more to be gleaned and talk through, great. I've had a range of those types of relationships in my life where it's, a couple intense sessions, one coffee, or it's over the course of a couple of years.
I see. So one thing that I want to do is ask you some quickfire questions and just pick your brain a bit on your trivia knowledge of Cal State Fullerton to see what's the first thing that comes to your mind when things happen. All right, so the quickfire questions.
Okay,
so
bring it.
I'm just going to start randomly with it. The year Cal State Fullerton started.
1960-something.
1957.
Okay, all right.
Can you name all of the presidents in order?
Oh, gosh. McCarthy, Langsdorff. It's not going to be in order. Oh my gosh, what was her name? I really should know this. She was the one who I think founded the President's Scholars.
It was the one right before President Gordon.
Yeah. Okay, skip. I'm totally failing. Gordon, Garcia, and Bertie.
Okay, so you only missed one. That's not bad. Honestly, I saw it like a minute ago. I saw it a minute ago.
I'll think of it as soon as this interview's over.
I know, yeah. I saw it a minute ago and I can't find it.
And she was awesome and brilliant and African American trailblazer.
Yeah,
and it's not there. We haven't named a building after her. That's why.
We
should name
a building after her. The Alumni House. We're changing it right now.
There we go. Sorry, guys.
So, your favorite place to study on campus? What was it?
The coffee cart in between Gordon Hall and Humanities.
Java?
Probably, I don't even know
like Java
if it was
Java
named
B?
something else when I was here.
Aloha Java.
That space.
Yeah, over there? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever take naps on campus? What was your favorite place to nap?
No, absolutely.
Oh.
Naps. Besides the ones in class, because every student does it. Because our brains shut off at certain times of day. I remember an 8:30 theology class one year that I'm like, I even with coffee, I can't do it. Naps on campus. I'm sure there were many. I did live on campus for the first year and near campus, so I probably just strategically went home. Curled up in chairs at random places.
That makes sense. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
You're a dog person. I need to find a cat person.
I had a cat. I love cats. Dogs are just simpler.
Are they though? You have to. You have to walk them. You have to do everything with them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to care for them. Cats, you just leave them.
More independent. I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Let's see. Spotify or Apple Music?
Spotify.
Your favorite album and artist?
Well, currently, Dear Evan Hansen is on constant repeat in my car because of my kiddo. It's just the one we're listening to right now, and I can sing it from heart right now. Hamilton's another one. I tend to listen to a lot of movie scores while I'm working. Things that don't have lyrics.
That makes sense. Do you listen to any Kanye West?
No.
You're not a Kanye West fan?
No.
Not his last album?
I haven't listened to it, but
I see. Okay.
I'm not against it.
I see. I'm just wondering. Just something that I'm wondering about. Any podcasts or books?
Podcasts. There's a couple. There was one called This Cultural Moment that I follow that gets my brain going. Armchair Experts with Dax Shepard. Oprah slips in there once in a while. And Jen Hatmaker's podcast, which For the Love. Which is it's kind of my Midwest mom's little off into friendship land podcast, but yeah.
All right. And your favorite building on campus?
Ooh. Favorite building.
I'm surprised it took you so long to say the alumni office.
Sorry. Funny. This is my first time in the building. I've been in the courtyard for many events, but it's the first time in the building. Oh gosh. I don't know. Favorite building on campus.
You don't have a favorite building?
There were so many I just hung out in all the time.
Everyone has a favorite building.
Humanities is the one I'm most familiar with. Library, probably.
Makes sense.
Library. Yeah. I had to choose.
Library is a solid choice, yeah.
It's gone through a lot of changes since when I was a student. It's pretty and sleek now, but
I think
spent lots of times up in the stacks.
I think College Park is my favorite. It's like off campus, but it's just so nice. You know?
I just have vivid memories of Nutwood Cafe and just greasing out is it still called Nutwood Cafe?
I don't think we have a Nutwood Cafe. Do we have a Nutwood Cafe?
Is there still a cafe on the bottom of College Park?
Oh no! Oh yeah! No, yeah, you're completely right there.
Yeah.
No, but they just after my first year, they automated everything.
Okay.
You just swipe your card, and then all the sandwiches. There used to be a Togo's in there that you would buy stuff from, and then they just changed it. And I
ate my fair share of orange chicken and chow mein here at TSU.
In the TSU for Panda Express.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have to.
That was study food when I was a freshman for sure.
I'm so glad they added up biology and what was the other place? There's like a pokey place now. I forgot what it's called.
Gosh.
Is it?
This campus is elevated.
There's a pokey place.
Ready to go back to college.
Hibachi.
Let's go,
Yeah,
alums.
It's fantastic. All right, so let's touch on you being a foster parent. You recently became a certified foster parent. So what was the reasoning for you doing that? Because I know there was a connection with, in a lot of the interviews that I saw and then writing pieces that you were part of, you mentioned that it was like a significant part and then something like that. So
fostering, it's been on my heart for about a decade. I did a service trip when I was first working at Vanguard, took a student service team over to Latvia. And that particular trip just had an impact on my heart from the standpoint of the ways that kids grow up when they are neglected or they don't have adults in their life who are bringing them up. And our hearts as human beings are local. We can care about the world and there's a lot that we can do to affect the world, but ultimately, what are we doing in our neighborhood with our families, etc. And so as an adult, I've never had a strong desire to have biological kids, but I knew I wanted to be a parent. And so this is something that's developed for a long time. I've been a part of both faith communities and social communities that really lean in and care for foster kids. And it was a long journey to get to a point where I knew I could do it as a single mom living in Orange County. But I got certified last July and I just got my first foster child placed with me about 3 weeks ago. It's current news. It is 100% the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, may ever do in my life. 100% rewarding, 100% hard. I look at her and her life and I'm amazed by, and I've known many other foster kids and adults who have been foster kids, and where they can achieve that resiliency and thrive and succeed is extraordinary. The stories are absolutely inspiring. So one of our other scholarship programs on campus is the Guardian Scholars. One of my best friends is a Guardian Scholar from our days at Cal State Fullerton. And the ways that we, just the stories, the stories of how she's thrived and how other Guardian Scholars have thrived are just I'm in awe of their stories.
And I believe President Gordon had like a role in it and was working on that.
Yes.
So that's great to hear, and congratulations on having a foster child. And
Thank
yeah, it must be tough trying to get in this new environment and working around it and all that. So
anybody who plops into parenthood for the first time, it's just a shock to the system. It's like, you know, you're going to be running a marathon, but you can't train for it. And then suddenly it's there. And in my case, it's an 11-year-old fully formed girl, and it's crazy. But it's a privilege to get to learn how her brain operates and what she reacts to and the way she interacts with her world and figure out how to help her. She's extraordinary. And everything I'm feeling emotionally and the moments of panic I have, I know are 100 times more intense for her, given what she's been through. So I'm amazed by her.
So you kind of have to step up, and you're kind of in a mentor role now where she has to look up to you, not just as a parent, but someone who is successful in life and someone who can just encourage her to be the best she can be.
I hope so. I believe that a lot of life happens when things are modeled, that you have to be able to, you can't be what you can't see. So when you have access to someone who is doing something or engaging with their social circles in a certain way, you learn by watching, you learn by doing. So I'm hoping that the world I'm opening up to her is something that is helpful to her. And similarly, she's going to teach me a lot about her world. And but parenting, it's thinking about the difference between parenting and mentoring. My head's been on this a lot lately, because as a parent, there's that role of providing care whether they like you or not. Mentoring comes with a little bit more freedom. So parenting, it's a very different role from anything I've ever experienced, and I'm learning the nuances of that in real time. But I'm grateful that she has other mentors in her life. So there's kind of that literally wraparound support system of the roles that adults play in helping her succeed. And I'm not the only one. If I was, she wouldn't stand a chance. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's that concept of it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
And it does.
So let's go back to when you were a history major. You said that you were thinking about it, what would take you 4 years to graduate, and you were only thinking for those 4 years. Mm-hmm. So after graduating, what were your thoughts of, I'm a history major, I'm not in a STEM field, and you know that there are very limited opportunities in that
mm-hmm. field.
So what went through your mind like right after mm-hmm. graduating?
To some extent, I wasn't even smart enough to realize that. There's kind of that, I think I had blinders on just a little bit, and I'm grateful, even the conversation I had this afternoon with our history students, those blinders are not there. They're very aware in the world they're going into that STEM professions are the ones we're all talking about, that we're all training toward. But we can't lose our humanities and social sciences. If we do, our ability to be human and navigate that goes away. Those are just as essential. Will they make as much money? Not always. There are definitely ways. One of our history professors was talking about 2 students he went to school with. One is now a hedge fund manager and one's a surgeon. So, being a history major, you can still go on and study anything, do anything, learn anything. History majors are amazing researchers. They are good about getting in there, figuring it out, organizing information, processing information, creating a way to communicate that a lot of the time. So it takes a little more creative thinking, I think. I think STEM fields are a little bit more career directed sometimes, where if I'm studying this, I'm going to apply these skills and go into this job. And often the humanities and social sciences are a little bit more flexible, but you have to also be a little more creative.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about where you work now.
So I'm the director of development for Think Together. During my time at Vanguard University, I got trained in the world of fundraising and development. In the university world, it's called university advancement. But it's its own industry. Most people, you don't major in development. You wander into it at some point. And in fact, our vice president for university advancement here at Cal State Fullerton was also a history major when he was a student. I found out today. Greg Sachs. So I Think Together is a large educational nonprofit in California. We serve over 200,000 students throughout the state every year. Our space, we partner with schools to change the odds for kids. There's about a third of our kids in public school in California are on the wrong side of the achievement gap, which is a startling number. And it's not for any lack of the school's best intentions of trying to use their resources to the best of their abilities. So we are a solution-oriented organization that's helping them try and close that gap. That involves after-school programs, support services, getting into schools and working with teachers to fine-tune what they're doing to serve their student population, because a lot of times teachers are not as well equipped to deal with the different demographics, et cetera. So it's an amazing organization, brilliant people who are trying to change their world in a big way, and it's inspiring.
So you always have like the sense of giving back to students, whether it's in this university or in general with nonprofits.
It's a theme.
So why is it important to you to give back why is it just important to give back?
I think the value proposition for education is an easy one to make. It's very hard to get anywhere without a good education. And it's something that is, giving everybody an equitable shot at whatever their future is going to be. That takes education. And I love that America as a nation has always had a high value on public education. It's we may not invest enough money in it at any given time. I'm not going to get political about that, but it's a value for us as a nation, as a culture, and so I fundraise for it. That's my job, and it's a pretty easy conversation to have with sitting across from just about any donor of, think back to your education. Tell me about what you experienced. Tell me about how your life would have been different if that teacher hadn't been there, if that subject hadn't been taught, if you couldn't write, like any of those things. Yeah. And it's every door follows from that. Mm-hmm. So education is 100% my heart.
And you're also on the board for Alumni of President Scholars.
Yeah. So our Alumni Club is really focused on mentorship, on giving back to support the program, because we were given so much as scholars. We all got full rides. Most of us graduated from college without debt, which is, again, an extraordinary gift in this world. So giving back, mentoring, and gathering. There's a lot of that mentorship that just happens in the context of social events that are great. So it's been great fun.
And it makes the full circle, like you said, with any big person, their education is something that always stuck with them, and they can realize if I didn't give back, or if someone didn't give back to the university when I was there, then my life would have been so much different. So I should give back to the university there.
I will say this because I've spent some time around alumni relations at Vanguard and here. If alumni are not giving back to their university within the first couple of years of graduating, it's very hard to get them back as donors.
I see.
It's something we fight for across university advancement and alumni relations. It's both obvious and hard to get alumni to give back. So I'd encourage any alum listening to this, if you got anything out of Cal State Fullerton, you should be giving back. It's that cycle. It's really important.
We had a guest previously. She mentioned that since we have 300,000 alumni, approximately, if each one donated $100 a year, that would be $30 million a year to Cal State Fullerton. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it is doable for alumni?
Yeah. I mean, let's be conservative about that. If 50% were able to give $100 a year, which I guarantee of our 300,000, at least 50% can give $100 a year. Numbers wise, we could be exponentially serving students and getting them equipped for. And I don't know what the percentage is, but the majority of students that graduate from Cal State Fullerton become part of our community right here. So it's community building. Yeah. I run into Titans everywhere I go. My kiddo's youth partner is currently working on her MFT here. We had that you're a Titan moment the other day, which was great. And our CFO at Think Together is a Titan alum, all the way down to our program leaders. We have so many who are either currently studying or are alums, and they're part of the fabric of our community. Mm-hmm.
So I want to know some advice that you would give to, let's say, a history student who's in their last year, or maybe in another art degree where they're struggling to understand, or maybe even it's a high school student or an undeclared major who's kind of debating on, should I go into a STEM field because it pays a lot, or should I go with where my heart is because it's maybe in arts or history or English or something like that?
It's really hard to answer that question in a generalist way because we're living in the world of education I live in. Yeah, STEM is incredibly important from the standpoint of making sure all the way for K through 12, if students are well prepared and understand their STEM field so they can make an educated choice about what they want to study, we're in better shape. At the college level, it's such a personal question. What you major in, every student kind of goes through that journey of figuring it out and often changing it halfway through, which is great. Because college is that place of kind of constant discovery. You're constantly interacting with, oh, that's new. Do I like that? But I think asking the questions of what are you consistently curious about, and what can you see being content doing for your entire life? Yes, we changed careers several times in our lives, most of us. So there's still flexibility in that. But that was a piece of advice I was given when I was thinking about trying again for PhD program is, if you do this, you are saying that's an investment for the rest of my life. Is that worth studying? And for me at the time, it wasn't. That decision played itself out really well. So yeah, if you see something in a STEM field that there's going to be that satisfaction and contentment in, fantastic. But you should not be afraid to go for something that gives you a Bachelor of Arts and history, English, political science, sociology, anthropology. All of these are incredibly valuable to our world, and we need them just as much.
I see. And then to end it off, is there maybe two pieces of advice that you would give in general to students at Cal State Fullerton, or something that you would do differently, or if you look back and said, I would focus more on this, or maybe touch on this a bit, that you would tell students right now to do? So two things that you would.
I'd be strategic about class projects. I think there's just kind of the sense often of you take the instruction the professor gives you as far as the topic you're going to be studying, and you do that because it's an assignment. And if we as students are thinking about projects a little bit more strategically. So like I have a chance to do a project that's going to really get me into this particular subject, so I figure out if I like it. You know, use those where you can, because you're going to be able to explore things. Because time when you're in college, yes, most of us are working part-time or full-time to support ourselves at this point, but that dedicated, protected time of study is something you don't really get any other time in your life. It is hard for me to sit down and read a book to learn something right now in my life. So using it well, being intentional with it, it's not just taking instruction, it's also taking that, a little bit more of that initiative to explore things. Be an explorer. There you go. There's my slogan for the day. Be an explorer. That doesn't sound dorky at all.
So thank you so much for joining us today,
Thanks
Sarah. I really appreciate you coming here with your advice and wisdom, especially talking about the mentor, because I know personally I've had that struggle where a lot of people say, oh, find a mentor. It's one of the most important things
totally
you can
easy.
do.
Yeah.
And then it's always like, all right, where do I start now?
Yeah.
Like their advice is just find a mentor. It's like someone tells you, oh yeah, just do a handstand. It's good for the body. Okay. How do I do that? So thank you so much for that insight on that. And then also giving back to students at Cal State Fullerton and just students around and education in particular.
My pleasure.
And if you want to watch this video along with all the other podcasts, we air them at CSUF Alumni on YouTube, and this one will also air live on Sunday at 4 p.m.